So Heather, you are now our first instructor, and have a seat.
Thank you. Too many fingers and not enough hands here. Well, good morning, everyone. Unaccustomed as I am. Right, now John has asked me to speak to you all about breast cancer. I just wondered how many of you have observed at very close hand advanced breast cancer. If I have a show of hands, please. All right, a few of you. Now, I guess I'm speaking specifically here of the very advanced fungating carcinoma, which is fairly difficult to manage from a nursing and from the person's point of view. You don't see a great many of them in hospital, if any, because the doctors usually attack them surgically, and that's it, end of story. I guess the first time I ever saw this type of cancer was probably 30 years ago, when a lady was brought in from a very, very remote area with bilateral breast cancer. The doctors took her to the theatre and amputated both breasts, which exposed the rib cage, and there before you was everything that was beneath the breast cage. That was before the rib cage. That was really quite something for a young nurse to see. Since then, we've seen varying degrees of success with people attempting to manage their own breast cancer. I have seen the body expel of its own accord sizable breast cancers, the size of, say, a huge mango, such as we have here, or perhaps, a small soccer ball. And I have seen the body expel of its own accord these large tumours. Well, okay, I'll come to that then. Stage 1, you have a lump. Then stage 2 is usually discoloration of the breast. Stage 3 is the breakdown of the external tissue. Now, most of these situations are dealt with, then the doctors will deal with aspiration or lumpectomy or mastectomy. However, if the person decides to stay at home, as I've observed many, and they've certainly never been on the Ray program because we've never known about it, and I've never been involved with the medical management, simply the nursing management. They then, these tumours that the body expels themselves, a lot of these people have been on mineral and vitamin therapy, but they've certainly never heard of enzymes, and I believe that this has been the missing link. I have seen, in spite of this, I have seen people survive, and the breast has healed over, provided it's allowed to heal by first intention. That, I'll explain later, is when the wound is allowed to heal from the bottom out and not encourage the skin to heal over in a great hurry. Once the tumour has been expelled by whatever means, usually by the body itself, the wound must be allowed to heal by first intention, which is allow the cavity to heal from the bottom out, and not to try and force the skin to heal over in a hurry, because this way the breast will heal and almost regenerate of its own accord. This is without body electronics, and I see absolute magic with body electronics. I guess when we have a case in point here now where John has had, Lynn, using the herb veil from New Zealand, which I'm not going to see it in my time here, but I think the time's coming very close where this tumour is going to be what we refer to as being sloughed out. Now, this is wonderful. The only thing is that the person and the family just please don't panic, because it's not a pretty sight. But all that needs to be done is to keep it clean, keep it so that it heals from the bottom out, and keep it open, and it will heal beautifully. I guess the big message is don't panic. So many people, when they see this great gaping cavity in the breast, then dash off, or the family prevail upon them to dash off to the doctor, and that's a problem. And the other thing too, I'd just like to say, I think that no one should ever think that they're alone in this world, because with your God presence, you can get through anything. Anything else you'd like me to say? Well, I think that's all. If there's any questions, perhaps. I'm no lecturer. Yes, Summer.
Sorry, I just wanted to know what you said was being used from New Zealand on the wound.
It's called herb veil cream. Herb, Herbvale. Veila. Right. Right. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Jenny. Mm-hmm. Herb veil 8. Yeah. We'll put the address on the board, and a set of instructions do come with it.
Heather, you said to keep the breast open. I mean, how do you do that if the sort of tissue starts growing over it? I mean, how do you actually keep it open?
Right. Well, you'll have a great cavity, probably, that'll be indented larger than my hand, usually, and that requires packing as a rule to keep it open. Something impregnated with oil as a rule, and perhaps the neem oil. I haven't discussed this with John, but that, I think, would be a possibility. It has great healing properties and what we know of it now. And you would just soak a gauze in the neem oil and pack that in, but not too tightly, so that it learns to heal from the bottom out. Right. Any other questions? NEEM, neem oil. Yeah. Lynn O'Neill does have a contact number and address for that. Oh, and that's going up on the board also. Right. Any?
I just wanted to ask you, Heather, would all breast cancers eventually become fungating? I mean, mine has, but only because I feel that because of the herb veil.
No, there is a specific type of breast cancer that does progress to be fungating. It looks like a large cauliflower gone wrong. It's really quite a grotesque sight. It's not. There are many different types of breast cancer, and I mean, I'm not up on the names of them. Some are very dainty little lumps and so forth. But this is a specific type of fungating carcinoma, which is, not nice for people that are not accustomed to seeing it.
I mean, mine was about the size of a grapefruit when I sort of put the herb veil on. I don't know that it would have become fungating without the herb veil. It possibly wouldn't have. Yeah, because then the cauliflower thing started to come out. Yeah.
I had one patient in the state of Indiana who had huge breast cancers. They were removed surgically. They cleaned out everything here, all the lymphatics in both arms, all across the chest. They're just skin stretched across bone. And she was very gray in color, very gray. She had cancer throughout her whole body, and she was given massive amounts of chemotherapy until she had maximum. She had given maximum amounts of radiation until she couldn't take anymore, and the doctor sent her home to die. In the meantime, she and her husband became separated for various reasons, and she was literally dying. We put her on the program, and now she had cancer throughout her body. We put her on a program, and she began working assiduously, tenaciously, with mental processes of love, no expectations, no resistances, and she became a very loving, gentle soul rather than a resistant, tied-up individual fully intent on getting rid of her cancer. You see the difference? She had been humiliated enough, and she had been operated on sufficiently to where there's really nothing left to operate on. Well, it happened that as her body began to regenerate under a nutritional program, I'm not going to say the nutrition did it. The nutrition was just a key to open the door, but her mental attitude was of such a nature that these huge masses of cancer throughout her body came out through the skin voluntarily and then closed up again without so much as a scar. Now, at that time, she continued loving. She continued forgiving, especially those things pertaining to relationships. Okay? Those things pertaining to mother and father. And she continued forgiving until she finally came up to my office and she wanted to have cranial work done. And what we did at that time was, now she had both breasts removed, okay? And what we did is we worked with her on the triple axis clavicle before we did the cranial work. And with the triple axis with the triple axis clavicle done properly on both sides, where before there was nothing but skin across bone. You could take afterwards this much skin on her rib cage because all of that regenerated. Her breasts regenerated on both sides. The lymph nodes on both sides regenerated, where you've seen people with the swelling of the arms, and you have to elevate the arms to get the lymph to flow down, and they have to be in these elastic support systems, to wherever they go. All of that cleared up completely. And then we went through cranial work, and at that time, more cancers came out of the body. We were quite happy. But the key was, it wasn't the program that did it. So I don't want you to say the Ray program did it. What did it was the change of mental attitude that she put into a oneness with God. Now this is the key to all healing. And it's not a mechanical approach of just point holding and nutrition. It's a mental attitude that you must hold in your mind of non-resistance, no expectations, and you take the attitude virtually of whatever. Now this is exceedingly important for all of us. I'd like to have Anita share some of the things that she has personally seen in this area of dealing with... Heather, are you all done, dear? Thank you very, very much. It was a good presentation.
Well, we had a lady up at the Hideaway who worked on the program, and she also had her breast cut out and also under the arms, the lymph glands under the arms, and that all regenerated. But she really worked on her word patterns. And one thing that I just remember one day when she got up in front of class and she said to everyone that she got to the point where she said she was willing to have it there for the rest of her life. And yeah, she got to the point where she was willing to have that for the rest of her life. And she just had completely no resistance to it anymore. The breast cancer, the breast removed without the regeneration. And that really touched me when she was able to say that, because the more you're going to center on the problem, the more it's going to be aggravated and the more it's going to grow. We have to get to a place where we can let it go. Just let it go. And we know we have it already, okay, we know it already, but let it go and just get on with your life.
That's simple. Now, would you talk, Anita, for a few minutes about this, no names, the lady in New Zealand, for example, down the South Island, in Motueka?
Yeah, she regenerated her whole breast, but I don't remember her word patterns or anything, because I wasn't at the point holding there. Okay. You were more at the...
Everything was carved out, all right? Everything regenerated. That's bottom line. But the fact is she took the position, and I love this word, whatever. No conditions, no expectations, no resistances, but live each moment to the fullness and take whatever comes and look upon that as a learning experience and a blessing. What I see oftentimes with people who have diseases that are terminal, I've been there, I know what I'm talking about, it's that I don't want to have anything interfere with my agenda. This is an attitude that I had. And when I had cancer 3 different times, each time I've overcome it, the cancer was interfering with my plans, my schedules, the things that I was doing, the things that I wanted to do. And what I had to do each time is just to lay back and let things be and not realize, shall I say realize that if I put my arm into a bucket of water and pull it back out again, I'll look at the bucket of water, there's no hole there. That's how important I am. Okay? If there's a bucket of water here, and I take my arm and put that into a bucket of water, and I pull my arm back out again, there's no hole. Okay? And the thing is I remember one of the great lessons that I had was after a seminar I took off by myself for a period of several days, and I just did nothing but go down to the beach and watch the waves. And I'd walk in the sand along the beach, and I see my footprints in the sand. And I think, well, this is a creation. There's a footprint of mine there. And then the wave would come through and wash away the footprint. And my creation was no more. And I began really looking at all of our silly creations that we put so much importance and attachment to. And I realized that everything in the physical universe changes. And it's in a constant state of change, and our best creations are only momentary. What is stable and what is permanent is our thought patterns. And our thought patterns are the most important things that we can deal with, because the footprints in the sands of time just become negligible because they just disappear. our great creations and skyscrapers and monuments and books and all that we write and all that we do are just a superficial little aspect of life and virtually go back into nothingness as time progresses, and as the years pass by, all of us will be forgotten. And this is the way life is. You go back 10,000 years, and do you have any monuments of the people that lived in those days? No. Do you have any books or records? Well, a few. But the thing is all of what we do is nothing but folly and vanity. And so once we look at all that, and we don't become attached to anything, then we can start to heal and regenerating and getting in touch with those laws of the universe, which are, first of all, using the laws of non-resistance. Then the body can start healing. And until we reach that point of non-resistance, our bodies cannot heal. And this is wherein the position that I use on a daily, momentary basis, whatever. No conditions, no expectations. And if I have no expectations, I can never be disappointed. Some people say to me, John, I'm sorry I disappointed you. Well, disappointment in them never entered my mind because they're divinely human. They're a delightful deviation from the norm. They do what they do in life. Okay? So there's no disappointment. I might play the game sometimes of being disappointed in something with a little twinkle in my eye, but there's no disappointment because there's no judgment. People are what people are. People do what people do. It's that simple. Let's keep it that simple. We do what we do. Let's keep it simple. Now, this is wherein we have to deal with these things. Now, so I just want to mention this aspect of the healing. We have to come to that point. And then the body regenerates when we no longer have an expectation. So I don't know what else I can say on that. Doug, do you want to say something on that, sir?
It seems to me that we create things with our thoughts, words, and emotions, and we can do this in two different ways. We can hold a pattern of thought, word, and emotion continuously out of box one with love and with conscious intent. That's one way we can create our reality, but of course the more common way we create our reality is out of box two, out of the unconscious mind, where most of the patterns of thought, word, and emotion that we're holding in a continual state of creation are being held there by our own resistances. And so when we're looking at something, if we use the example of a breast cancer, the main thing that we're really looking at here is we have a pattern of resistance, and as long as that pattern of resistance is held there, which basically means as long as we keep resisting things being the way they are, things will keep being the way they are. And it's really that simple. You have to be willing for things to be the way they are before it's even possible for things to change for the better.
Repeat.
You have to be willing, perfectly willing, for things to be exactly the way they are before you're going to really have a chance of changing things for the better. Because if you're not willing for things to be just as they are, then you're resisting things being just as they are. And all that's going to do is just perpetuate things being just as they are. So the paradox, I think, for a lot of people is if you want to heal something, on the one hand, you have to do everything that's necessary to heal it, and yet on the other hand, you have to be absolutely and completely willing for it to not heal. And I think that's one of the hardest things for any of us, is to be willing to accept things being just as they are, while simultaneously doing everything within our power to change it for the better.
You all know what a paradox is? Take a look up here. Here's one dock. Here's another dock. That's a paradox.
Don't resist it.
Okay. Bob Wilson. Excuse me. Lynn, you have something you'd like to say.
Just when you're talking about that letting go, I realised that originally the reason I didn't have a lumpectomy or any surgery was because I didn't trust the doctors to just do what I would like them to do.
but also I didn't want a disfiguration of my breast because I saw what happened to my sister who had the full mastectomy and lymph nodes. But I eventually got to a point where I just had to let go of all that and say, I don't give a fuck what happens to my breast. That if that's what it needs to happen, if I have to be disfigured or whatever, and the way it looks at the moment, it looks like a battleground. But I had to let go of all of that and say, well, whatever happens, happens, and be happy with that. And it's like I've been holding on to my nipple, sort of thinking, oh my God, am I going to lose my nipple? But it's like, it's got to go too. And whatever happens after that, whether it regenerates or not, I don't care. But it's taken 2 years to get to a point to say that.
Beautiful.
Just getting back to the use of the Veil 8.
The herb Veil 8.
Yes, herb Veil 8. Would you have to wait until the skin was broken, or can you use it just on the closed skin?
The moment that you have a skin cancer, for example, you can contact in Auckland, New Zealand, a lady who has pioneered this area and has spent a number of years developing it. Her name is Val Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T. Now, Val Wright is the expert in this particular area. Now, the herb Veil 8 is a material which was developed by a gentleman in Portugal. And he developed the first material which has been utilized in different places around the world. And this is still in existence and still being manufactured. The material that Val Wright is using has been a, shall we say, an improvement upon the herb Veil 8. I'm just letting you know exactly how it is. Now, you can get the herb Veil 8 from Altered States in Auckland, New Zealand. It's 94 Grundy Street in up on the board, Anita, if you would, please. It's 94 Grundy Street, and it's in what? Number 4 Grundy Street. Spell it. Gundry. It's on the board, you say? Okay, you got it up there. But you write those folks, and for $99, I believe the price is, you'll get a little bit of instructions on that. Tell you exactly what to do and how to use it. And they'll give you just this little tiny tub. And I have used it, and it has worked for a number of skin cancers that I have treated in my clinic in Rarotonga. Now, the thing is first of all, you've got this little skin cancer. And then suddenly this stuff begins working, and it opens into a great big cesspit of this white foamy stuff that starts running out of it. And that continues on for about 3 weeks. And then it closes up, and you got a great big hole down in there. And then very rapidly you have a scar tissue fills in that area, and then in a short time it's all healed. And the skin cancer is completely gone. This does include the melanomas, and many people have been treated with this herb Veil 8 with the melanoma. Now, I believe that Val Wright, who has her office right on Queen Street near Victoria Street in Auckland, that Val, for handling complicated cases of cancer, she's been trained in body electronics. She knows colon therapy, different types of mineral baths, different types of poultice, and so on. And she has done a beautiful job of working with this particular situation. But it is an advanced, what's the word I want to use? Formula over the Herb Veil 8. Now the Herb Veil 8 has worked. It's worked for years. But this advanced formula that Val Wright has proved conclusively on working with large numbers of people with skin cancer, it's all been statistically proven out its effectiveness. And this is where I would really recommend that you, if you have a problem or know somebody with a problem, contact Val Wright in Auckland, New Zealand. I don't think it'll come any better.
Yeah, I can substantiate that. This time last year I had a basal cell carcinoma on my leg, and we used one small portion of Veil 8, and as John described is what happened. But I think, Marie, can you come out and tell us your little story?
Well, I had a mole on the back of my ear. It seemed to be a family thing because my girls had it too, and it started to irritate. And I happened to mention to Jenny about it, and she had this Herb Veil 8, and we put it on. And then my husband took a photograph of it actually as it started to move. It was quite interesting. And it came right on, and there's nothing there at all. And I've got a photograph of my granddaughter's wedding where the back of my neck's showing, and this thing looks like a huge spider on the back of my neck. And it's quite gone. So I can verify that too.
Thank you very much.
Actually, Marie said it was a mole. As far as I was concerned, it was a growth. It was not just a black, flat mole. It was about as big as the top of my thumb there, and it was protruding at least 1/8 of an inch out from the back of the neck. There's not even a mark there now, and it went in, from memory, about 10 days. It went. It's remarkable stuff.
Well, that was the Herb Veil 8 that you used. Yes, sir. Now that works.
I wanted to ask you about the use of papaya leaves for breast cancer. When you were speaking about it the other day, I understood that it was used for once the breast had opened. Can it be used prior to the breast opening?
Some people have. They've used it prior to the breast opening, and they continue using after its opening because what the papaya leaf does, it has the papain in it, and the papain eats up any type of abnormal tissue. It'll leave healthy tissue alone.
Just on the Herb Veil 8 and some of the Val Wright's formula, do you use those on all kinds of breast cancer, whether they're open or closed, and is a breast cancer that's sort of well into the breast, is it always going to open up, or is that the best method of healing, or what?
We've had, in the Cook Islands, we've had women where the entire breast has been eaten away by the cancer. And there's a great big sunken hole in there into the lungs. And the woman has been coughing and coughing and coughing and coughing and coughing day and night. Okay, what has she got? Lung cancer. And she has other problems also that we won't even get into. But you can look at the eye and you can see what the problems are. Now, the lung cancer I'm not concerned about because that's a highly vascular organ, and usually within 2 weeks the lung cancer clears up. This has been our findings. But the cancer of the breast was quite more, it just finally when it started to heal, it ejected all of this junk that came out of this area that had already been eaten away. And you have these huge holes of running ulcerations. I hope you have a strong stomach. And all this running junk that stunk, that had been in there for who knows how long, would come out until the thing was totally clean. And then, as Heather pointed out adequately here, it starts to heal from the inside out. And so with the Schweitzer, the papaya leaves, and so on, the thing just kept building and building and building and building. Now, she was on the island council. And as soon as she had all these responsibilities she had to take care of, and as soon as she was on the mend, what happens when you know you're on the mend? You're up and about and gone. I haven't seen her since, and she's been a very busy lady. But the thing was, is this had the coughing was gone, her skin was normal, she was feeling alive again and well, and this was building up and healing over with scar tissue the last I saw her.
Okay, just so that I've got it absolutely clear, John, is so every breast cancer is going to eventually open up, and it will expel the cancer from the skin tissue around the breast. Is that what you're saying?
No. Some of the breast cancers are reabsorbed back into the body. And they're just simply reabsorbed, and just where the body eats up the tissue and just goes right back to normal, and everything is back to normal again.
Okay, so the Herb Vale 8 and Val Wright formula, does that promote the expulsion of the cancer out through the breast, or does it promote the expulsion of the cancer either way, or what?
All I have seen with the Herb Vale 8 and the Val Wright formula is that it brings it to a foamy, white, pussy cleansing, and the cancer is eaten up and distilled.
Okay.
Not reabsorbed.
Okay, so someone comes to you with breast cancer, and they've got a lump well into their breast, and you're not sure whether it's likely to be expelled by the body internally and say out through one of the out through another organ, or it's going to eventually break out and become a fungating carcinoma. Would you recommend that all breast cancers go onto the Herb Vale 8, or
no,
just the ones that you feel are going to be fungating?
We have had people here, Simon, who have had a change of mental attitude. And virtually overnight, those things that were malignant and those things that were hard and encrustated in there virtually have disappeared. And it hasn't come out through the skin. It's been reabsorbed back into the body. So you have two different ways that this can go.
Okay. And in what cases then do you recommend using the Herb Vale 8 or Val Wright's formula?
Okay, I don't believe that I'm qualified yet to tell you exactly what to do in this area, because I haven't had enough personal experience with it. I have heard what other people say. I would recommend you getting the Herb Vale information and then make up your own mind regarding it, because I'm still looking at it. I'm looking at it from different aspects of it. Some people say one thing and some people say another, and some people swear by it both ways. I don't have an answer yet as to which is the best way of using it. Okay?
Simon, I just want to let you know that John didn't tell me to put it on my breast. He actually told me in September to get it and put it on this mole on my leg. And then when I got the information, they said that they'd had some success with breast cancer. And I'd been praying and praying and praying for something to draw this out of my body. That was my mental picture of it being drawn out of my body. And then when I got this information, it was like the answer to my prayer. So I took it upon myself to start using it, but I haven't done it properly, and I've sort of now under John's guidance a bit more. It's a different situation, but
now she's under a lot of pain and she's happy.
Yeah. Because it is very painful. It's extremely painful for the first 24 hours or so when it's applied. But I just took it upon myself. It wasn't under any direction of anybody. It was just it just felt right at the time. But I'm not sure, like if it's inside too deeply inside the skin, I'm not sure that it would actually work, because mine actually was very large and it was just growing outwards. But it had a couple of sort of like big ulcerations that had come up on the top, and that's where we started applying it, because they were close to the skin. But where I've put it on skin that's not so, I don't know, it hasn't obviously got cancer, it doesn't take. It just won't work. So if something is very deep within, I don't think it will penetrate through the layers of the skin, because I've got a lump under my arm, and I don't think it would even get into that because of the layers of the skin.
It won't affect normal tissue.
No, it won't affect normal tissue, but I'm saying that unless it's fairly close to the skin, sort of really
You mean the
close.
cancer?
Yeah. I don't think it will sort of go through into something deep down inside. That's been my experience.
I don't know that. All I know is that I had a skin cancer on my shoulder a short time ago, and I applied the herb veil to it. And it went way down in, and there's a great big gaping hole there. It went way down into my shoulder. And I didn't believe that such a little tiny dark spot, on my shoulder here, would penetrate all the way down into my shoulder. I didn't believe that.
Oh, yeah, no.
And I put one drop on, and I had this huge cavity that filled in, and it's good as gold.
But what I'm saying is, if I had tried applying this when my breast cancer was only a tiny little thing right inside, I don't think it would eat through, because with skin cancer it's close to the skin. This is just my observation and what's been happening with myself. Because even though we applied it all the other day, there's some areas that haven't taken. Yeah.
I don't know.
But anyway, I don't know the answers either.
Now, I would contact Val Wright. Now, here's the lady who is the expert in this area, and Val Wright in Auckland, and she's the one that understands and can tell you, because she's worked with many people on all types of cancers in many different modalities. And this, I would feel, would be the expert in this area. Just Val Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T in Auckland. And just, it's in the... I don't know if we have the address here. It's not on the herb veil. The herb veil is another, is the older model, shall we say, of this salve, or the formula. But here's where I have a lot of questions on it, because, like I told you before, I'm skeptical on something for quite a little while, and I keep looking at it and looking at it and looking at it, until eventually I become fully convinced of its efficaciousness.
John, you might already know, but Val's now working with equipment so that you can place a limb inside and have the diagnosis of cancer before it comes out onto the skin now.
There again, I don't know. Okay. I know Val says she has all this equipment. There's a lot of equipment, a lot of electronic equipment out there, and I see it come and I see it go with different practitioners over the years. And what people claim is one thing, and what is reality is another. I do know that the herb veil formula works, and Val's using that, and whatever she uses along with that's going to be her business.
I just mean like early diagnosis, so you can work with something much simpler than waiting for things to come to fruition.
That's the diagnosis of the iris and sclera of the eye, to me, are more meaningful than all the electronic equipment in the world. And this has been my position.
There's a similar product available in Australia. It was originally developed by a research doctor in Brisbane University, and he got it available in the form of prescription, and it's a very clever formula. I can't recall it offhand, but he's got essential fatty acids in there, as in flax. He's investigated herbal medicine, and it's quite a very clever formula. Anyway, what happened was he had to pay so many thousands of dollars every year for his to be able to produce this product. And what happened was it was available on prescription, and it worked. And so then the doctors refused to prescribe it and pushed it out. So then no one could access it. So then what he had to do was he made another formula. He had to change it by 5 or 10%, and he used a slightly different species of a herb, which wasn't quite as good as the original one, but it still works. And I've seen photographs of case studies, and there's a lady with a nose so severely affected by cancer that there was no nose left. It was just a complete ulcerated cavity. It shows the before and after, and the nose is fully regenerated back there, and she's very happy because it was exactly the same as her original nose. And there's a lot of photographs available. I just found out about this recently, and I should have brought it up here, but if anyone's interested, I could get some information sent up here, because it is available in Australia, and it doesn't cost quite as much as the other one. Yeah. No, but that's for skin cancers, yeah. Well, his original formula did cover that, but the doctors won't prescribe it, and no.
We have to be very, very careful about all these different projects, products, machines, promises, and so on, and advertising that people have. You have to be very wary of these things and look at everything with a half of a jaundiced eye, because you'll find that a lot of things are not really what they are represented to be, because you have a lot of marvelous cure-alls out there that come and go with the wind. And you just have to be very careful, because a little bit of knowledge can be extremely a dangerous thing. And we have said that before. So just be wise and look at things and do the best you can. And you can't expect anything more than that. Yes, sir.
Just a few comments on herb valate. I'm totally sceptic about those sorts of things, so I was very, very careful. And I bought some, and I've had 3 clients come in. One lady with a skin cancer here. It was just like a scurfy sort of a looking mark on a forehead, and the doctors quoted her $2,000 to have it removed, and the skin sutured up and made it look nice. And I offered it to her and said, well, you can have it for $5 if you like, just put it on yourself, and you're willing to take the risk. And she did it, and 3 weeks later it was totally removed. There was nothing there. There was another lady that came in with a running sore on the side of her face that she's had for about 5 years, and it just had a little scab on it at the time. And I offered it to her and charged her $5 again, and it was gone within 2 weeks. And there was one lady that had an ulcerated thing on the back of her leg here, and I was massaging her, and I said, would you like to try some of this stuff? If you're willing to try it, we'll just see what happens. It was very painful. None of these ladies left it on for more than about 8 hours, and then they washed it off, and they just put something like a piece of tissue over it. And this lady did the same thing. Now hers was deeper, and it ate right into the leg, and it was very, very painful. But she had other problems going on, and it took about a month. And at times she rang up a few times and she said, I don't know about this. And I said, well, just stay with it and see what happens. So she only put it on for about 8 hours, and within a month the whole thing was completely healed. So that's my experience with it.
Thank you very much, Rex.
Now, with breast cancer, for example, when you have already a deep cavity, how long do you put this herb valate actually onto the wound? I mean, do you keep on putting it on? Or?
Get a copy of the information.
Okay.
And then study that for yourself. And your guess is going to be as good as mine, because I find that different people will respond differently to the same formulation.
I just want to reiterate about this being overwhelmed by your problem, especially if it's cancer, like a breast cancer, that John was talking about before. What happens, the average person gets totally overwhelmed and really wants to get better, so gets the whole life is revolving around that problem. And you're actually being overwhelmed by that problem, and your body responds to that being overwhelmed, and you actually do become overwhelmed. It actually takes over. Whereas if you can try and relate to yourself as being yourself, your true self, being the strongest and in control, and still look at your cancer and look at your problem and respect it and do something about it, but turn yourself around and start loving yourself and enjoying yourself, singing, watching a funny movie, doing things to allow happiness and enthusiasm, the God I am, back into your being, you'll find that things work much quicker for you in expulsion. The other thing I want to say is that for people in Australia, the Blue Nursing Association has no problem with going and doing your dressings daily. They don't mind you doing alternative therapy, because a lot of people in Australia think that you can't go and get help from the Blue Nurses or elsewhere because you've decided to opt out from surgery. That's not the case. The Blue Nurses are there for you, and all they charge is for your dressings. That's all. And they're very spiritual people. They're very beautiful people. They'll help you get through it.
Thank you, Christabel. Yeah, I think it's very, very important what Christabel said. I think there's different levels of letting go. You may feel like you've let go, and you really haven't. You know, you're still walking around every single second, you know, talking about your breast cancer, and you say, well, I've let go. You know, I've let go of the doctors, I've let go of this, I've let go of that. But there's different levels of letting go. There's getting to that clear space, like what she's talking about, where you feel the God presence, and you're not walking around all day, you know, holding your breast, you know, talking about the oozing, going up to people and, you know, constantly saying how much pain you're in and all this stuff. There's different levels of letting go. And I think you really have to start looking at that.
What I always seem to feel is when all else fails and I know that I've put in my very damnness, my best, you know, then I recognise faith and I think, far out, Christabel, faith. And I sing the song, it's called Sweet Surrender. And I literally visualise, I can see myself with a violin. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but I'm actually playing the violin and letting go of absolutely everything. And it's sweet surrender, and it's over to you, universe. Things start working.
Thank you. I have an address here, Val Wright, and I have the phone number. Now, John, why did you write this here? Is that the new one?
I haven't any idea.
Okay. Well,
that's the address of her office.
That's the... Okay. Well, I have the Palms.
Nope.
That's not right? That's not the right one now.
The address is 87 Queens...
Your handwriting.
I can't read my handwriting. I'm sorry.
The phone. Yeah, give him the phone.
I guess it says... I don't know what it says. And the phone number's not correct either.
No?
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's the yeah, I remember now. This is the Dingwall building, Dingwall, 7th floor of the Dingwall building. And it's 87 on Queen Street in Auckland. That's for Val Wright.
87 Queen Street. Wait. 87 Queen Street, 7th floor of the Dingwall building. Yeah, Dingwall building. Right. In Auckland, New Zealand. Auckland is Auckland, New Zealand. Oh, she does. Did she move again? But she's also like she's between. Is this valid?
According to...
I met Val just recently, and she's now living in Devonport in Auckland. So directory service would help you there. She is travelling a lot, and so I believe she's also in America a lot too.
Does she call her clinic?
Oh, yes, yes.
What does she call her?
Oh, pardon?
The clinic is still in Queen Street.
I presume so, yes.
Okay.
But just as a backup, I mean.
I just wanted to offer a little bit of information on some research that came out on cancer tissue. I don't know if it's been mentioned before or not, or how aware people are of it. But just if you could conceptualize this pleomorphic concept where you have your different types of cells and organisms. Basically, you have your human cell right at the top at a very high level on the evolutionary scale, with a very large sort of electrical potential in the tissues, a very highly oxygenated environment, basically free of toxic material. And then you go all the way down through the scale of evolution to your very, very primitive cells all the way down the bottom. And when you get to a cell that has only one function left, which is to reproduce itself, then you have a cancerous cell. But what they found, you're coming up through your protozoa, your different types of amoeba, and your single-celled, and then your multi-celled organisms, and then yeast and candidas, and eventually make it all the way up the scale. Now, they did some research, and they found that there are radiations, very, very subtle radiations that are nevertheless measurable with the current understanding of people who bother to actually combine two fields of science, which will be medicine and biology and pathology with your measurement of electromagnetic energies. And what they found was that the radiations coming off fungus and your different types of candida-like organisms had a destructive effect on cancer tissue. Now, I haven't validated that research, I've just read it, but I wanted to offer it. So what they did was they took a microscope slide, they put the cancer culture, or the cancer cells there, they covered it over with a cover slip, a very thin cover slip of glass, and then they put another culture of fungus just on top of the cover slip. And they did this with several controls. They left, with nothing on top, and they put the fungus on top of the others, and they found that the fungus would emit a particular set of frequencies and radiations as it reproduced itself. And what this did was, apparently, it completely inhibited the reproduction of the cancer cells. And the cancer cells just sort of withered away, and it all just turned into a mushy solution, and that was all that was left. I haven't validated that research, but I respect the author. A friend of mine knows him, and it was very interesting to me. So I just wanted to offer it as a piece in the puzzle.
Now, let's look at it. Just stay right with us, Kyle. Stand up, sir. You may want to say some things here. When you introduce, let's say, fungus to a given area, you have a morphogenetic field which surrounds that fungus. When that morphogenetic field influences the field of the cancer, it changes the morphogenetic field of the cancer, and the cancer is reabsorbed back in the body. Because cancer in reality can only exist within certain small parameters. If you suppress for example, if you suppress the body by using chemotherapy and radiation, then the cancer ceases to grow for a period of time. And so you think you have effected a cure, when actually you have created a condition where the vital life of the body sinks below the lower parameter within which cancer can grow. Or you can take a person and bring them up through that lower parameter, and the cancer will begin to spread, because now you've got cancer working within its own parameter where it can grow, and you have to continue changing the energy field until you get above the upper parameter, and then the cancer just withers and dies. It's reabsorbed literally back in the body. The cells of the cancer are reabsorbed back, as we talked the first week, will reabsorb back and become a red blood cell.
And so the author of this particular work, I remember when I read it, I thought, well, I don't understand the healing crisis yet. But it's interesting because from what I've observed, there's a scale of suppression that people need to go through eventually that generally exists before they can make a cancer. And as they go backwards through that scale of progression in the healing process, then they find that the cancer dissolves, but then they have back all of this old fungal eliminations that they had trying to come out their skin and trying to come out through their sex organs and trying to come out through their ears and all of these sorts of things that they suppressed at the time, and they sort of don't even remember that. But the thing is, when they get into these symptoms of fungus, they think, oh, now I got my cancer, now I've got my fungus too, and I'm just getting worse. And I think you really got to give people healing crisis tapes, because it doesn't seem to matter how many times you tell them yourself. They need to have something they can play over and over and read before they remember and get a concept that they're actually going through a healing process when they get back these old fungal symptoms.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thanks, Kyle. With my patients, I actually type out a page on healing crisis, and I have it in fluoro yellow paper, and I make sure that they explain a healing crisis to me about 10 times before I actually start point holding on them. So maybe you could do that.
I'd like to respond to that, Christabel. I think you're very wise, and I think we should all listen to Christabel, because a couple of nights ago, maybe 3 nights ago now, I had my points held. And I think from my experiences of the past year, you would expect me to have a fairly good feel of what a healing crisis is and to be able to recognise one. A couple of hours after the point holding, I woke up in a massive healing crisis, and I was up all night. And through the small hours of the morning, I started to doubt that it was healing crisis, and I began to feel that maybe I was dying after all. And
those are the best healing crises.
Consider myself almost an expert in healing crisis now, but I really did start to forget. So please let your patients know and make sure that they do understand, and they'll still forget anyway, I guess.
With all the experience that I've had in this field of working in it in over 45 years now, it's a long time, you know that? And the thing is I still have my doubts at times as to whether something is a healing crisis or whether I'm truly dying. And that even though we're educated, we know, we understand, we intellectualize, when we're in it, we're not quite sure of whether we're going to be able to survive the night. And we're not really concerned about the next day, because it's a moment-by-moment survival. Now, I want you to be aware of that. And they don't get easier, they get better. Okay, Doug.
I wanted to look a little bit at what Kyle's brought up here and share some thoughts that have occurred to me over the years. We talked a few weeks back about a couple different individuals. We talked about Gaston Nassans, who's the French scientist living in Canada, and his concept of the somatid, where the somatid was basically a subcellular level of intelligence that existed within the body and yet wasn't really the body. In other words, when your body dies, the somatids do continue on. They don't die with you. They do actually continue on, even though for all intents and purposes right now they appear to be part of you. George Merkel, another scientist down in Texas, had a similar concept with what he called the chondriana, where it seemed to be very definitely a subcellular level of intelligence, yet it also appeared to be able to exist somewhat independently of the body and continue on. Now, I've heard John make the statement over the years that there's no space in which intelligence does not exist. And I think it's important for us to understand that when we're dealing with our own physical body, we're dealing with many, many, many different levels of intelligence. I think it's a big mistake to consider the human body as animated simply by one intelligence, which you might call your soul. I think it's important to realize that there's intelligence at the genetic level that is in operation within the physical body. I think it's important to understand that there's intelligence at the cellular level within the physical body. There's probably intelligence at the molecular and the atomic level. And there certainly are these intelligences such as the somatids and the chondriana. So when we're trying to understand the various types of processes going on in the physical body, like we've been looking at breast cancer as an example, and when we're trying to understand the process of the body either going downhill and degenerating, or we're trying to understand the process of the body apparently going uphill and going through healing crisis, it's occurred to me over the years that intelligence creates whatever is. As John would say, thought is senior to substance, or another way of phrasing that is substance exists for the purpose of being acted upon by the intelligence. Thought is senior to substance, or substance exists for the purpose of being acted upon by the intelligence. And I think the glitch in a lot of our thinking here is we're limiting this concept to one intelligence when we're looking at the human body, rather than understanding that the physical body is really the summation of expression of a number of intelligences, billions and billions of intelligences, which don't necessarily always have the same agenda, which don't necessarily always have the same interests. One of the things that I was very struck by in studying some of the work of George Merkel and Gaston Nassans, and an idea that I've kind of looked at over the years is this. It appears that under normal circumstances, the somatids and or the chondriana will appear to do everything that their intelligence is capable of to support the continued existence of you and me. It appears that for the most part that level of intelligence seems to do everything it can to support us no matter what mistakes we make, and that these levels of intelligence are very much working with us. And so perhaps in this light, when we have things like viruses and bacteria and fungi and other things appear in the body, maybe in many instances these are not problems. These may well be the attempts of these other intelligences to help us through the mess we're in. One of the things that I did find in some of the work I studied there with Merkel and Gaston Nassans was it did appear that the inference was there at any rate as I read it, that there did seem to be a point at which these other intelligences could see which way the wind was blowing and could see which way the human body was going. And it seemed to me in reading this, and I may be mistaken on this, but my impression was that let me just put it to you this way. The thought that I had was this. Perhaps if we're doing a reasonably good job of behaving, perhaps if we're doing a reasonably good job of following natural law, then these intelligences will work with us, these subcellular intelligences and other intelligences, and perhaps they will do what they can to support our continued existence. But on the other hand, perhaps sometimes a point is reached where through our own foolishness we've placed ourselves so far out of harmony with natural law that these other levels of intelligence will actually start to work quite in opposite the direction to bring about the rapid demise of the physical organism which we identify as ourselves. It's just a thought, but it's something that I've looked at a lot over the years, and I would kind of be interested to hear what John or Anita might have to say on that.
I am sometimes amazed at the lack of ability that many of these great men who have discovered the bion, the chondriana, the basic cycles of the pleomorphism that we study, I'm amazed at their lack of understanding, because they're always looking upon how the physical body and its quote-unquote terrain will determine the positioning of the, shall we say, of these various small organisms like the chondriana or the various somatids or the bions and so on, wherein they take upon themselves the nature of the energy field which controls it. There's no question about that. They observe that. But they all miss the most important point. They all miss it. If they understand it, they certainly don't bring it out in their literature. And that is that the entire terrain or the morphogenetic field is determined by consciousness. And they don't look at that. And they don't look at these tiny somatotids being influenced or entrained, if I can use that expression, entrained by the thought processes of the superior intelligence which governs it. Because basically we are the governor of our own body. We are God to the multitude of individual intelligences which occupy this body. We are God to those intelligences. And by our thinking, moment by moment, then they are entrained by our thinking and become what we create for them. Now, if we do not think, where we're not projecting our thought, feeling, and spoken word from box one, so to speak, then we are relegated to be totally controlled by box two, which is the reactive mechanisms. And in other words, if we're not governing our own life moment by moment, we are relegated to become nothing more than a conditioned robot, responding to the programming of our genetics, responding to the programming of the soul level, of all our collective or summation of our resistances of the past. Now, if we are not putting forth continual love in a godly manner, then we are putting ourselves back into a situation of resistance, and then that resistance is under the creative fold, shall we say, 24 hours a day, and these little somatotids or other type of little organisms will then be entrained by our reactive mechanism rather than by being entrained by the moment-by-moment generation of enthusiasm, or what the Greeks use in their interpretation of that, the love in you or the God in you. Now this is wherein the enthusiasm, we must manufacture it. I am amazed yet at people who have been in body electronics for 8 or 10 years, and they're waiting for something to tickle their fancy, if I can use that expression. They're waiting for something to spark them so that they feel the chemistry of the moment, when they don't realize that all light comes from within the individual. We are waiting for something to trigger us from without to make us happy. We're looking for something to make us feel good from without. And that is a vain search at the momentary happiness that we have is simply the meeting of our reactive mechanism, so we feel good. And when that feel-good program is over, a few minutes later or a few hours later, then we're right back into the reactive phase of pain and misery, because we haven't learned how yet to generate love, which overcomes all of these things. And it's the love from the conscious level which controls, directs, and makes manifest the morphogenetic field which these little tiny microorganisms, if I can use that expression, respond to, and then move in their patterns of entrainment, which comes from our conscious thinking. Our body is nothing but a mass of intelligence, and usually we're resisting the pain that we have, which persists in the problem. We resist the pain, and so these little intelligences are entrained by our resistance rather than entrained by our unconditional love and unconditional forgiveness. And so here's where we necessarily must learn to be a constant, we talked about sun. We're a constant sun, where we are a constant source of joy and light, rather than falling into the trap of resistance which holds us in this continual, perpetual chains of death. So that's my comment, Doug. I hope I helped on that matter. I'd like your comments, sir.
That's kind of expanded my awareness in that area a little bit, and I appreciate that. What I'm hearing you say is that these other levels of intelligence within us, they do exist, and they do exert a certain degree of influence on what happens. But
if we are reactive.
But ultimately, they are subject to the exercise of the superior intelligence, which is us. So basically, if we make the commitment to adhere to correct principle, then the other levels of intelligence within us will fall into line and do everything they can to support us and uplift us and work with us. But if we allow ourselves to fall out of harmony with correct principles, if we allow ourselves to wallow and fall into a state of reaction, then that too will entrain. Basically, if we allow the death crystals to take over, then the somatids or any of these other levels of intelligence will respond to that and move accordingly.
Let's look at it from a practical point of view now, because we can get so involved in words that we lose sight of the action of the moment. I am happy. And we put that out as an affirmation. No conditions, no expectations. Or we put out, well, I would be happy if this and this were fulfilled, or I'd be happy if this and this happened. And you find that these people are never happy because they never have their conditions fulfilled. But if we put out the word pattern, I am happy, then the universe will provide everything that person needs to keep them in a continual state of happiness. And the cells in our body will be dancing. The intelligence there will be responding. But what do? We wallow around, how can I be happy when this isn't right? How can I be happy when that isn't right? How can I be happy when this over here isn't being perfect? How can I be happy when I'm I'm not good enough? How can I be happy when things just don't run well? Rather than just assuming the beingness. You have a beingness that you assume, and all else falls into order. And then you'll be doing what happy people do, and you'll be having what happy people have. And so you have a little scale that originated originally with L. Ron Hubbard, and he got it from the Buddhists, I believe, which is your beingness determines your doingness and determines your havingness, as he calls it. And I thought that was brilliant. Your beingness determines your doingness, and your doingness determines your havingness. But most of the time we're bass-backwards again. And we have to have things a certain way before we can do certain things, before we can be a certain way. And we put such conditions on ourselves that we never reach that state of happiness, rather than just being happy. Christabel wants to say something.
With my meditation students, what I always get them to do, because how can you say I'm happy when you're feeling miserable, sort of thing? All of a sudden, I'm happy, sounds false. So what I do is I get them to promise me that they could just go into nature just for 5 minutes each day and look at the sheer delight and the sheer beauty, the divine nature of a leaf or of a butterfly or whatever's out there, and just take it and embrace it in thought and see the sheer beauty of absolute creation, because that's actually what they are themselves. And somehow that gets things turned around and they start seeing beauty around them and they start becoming it. Then it's easier for them to say, I am happy. And believe it, as soon as you say, I'm happy, you're happy. I mean, it's ridiculous. But it's free.
I would like to extend this concept from the somatid even out to the molecules of the air, the molecules of the plants, the molecules of the trees. They're all affected by this consciousness we're putting out, this love we're putting out. Oh, sorry. Yes. I'm expanding. But yes, I see it on all levels, going from the somatid out to all the molecules in the universe. Every single molecule we're affecting every second by the love and the consciousness we're putting out to them. I'm sure the molecules of the air are delighted when we're in a happy state, when we're having fun and we're joking. They're alive, they're intelligent.
So if you apply that principle, I am happy, which I guess is assuming the virtue if you have it not. If you look at the situation with the lady that had the cranial, that was unhappy her whole life, if you turned that the other way, could you say that if she applied that consciously and diligently, that in the end that may have actually shifted the cranial itself, working the other way?
What Simone is looking at is that here you have a lesion in one of the cranial faults, okay? And the person is, I'm not happy. And no matter how they try to affirm, through affirmation, their happiness, they feel this overwhelming emotion of unhappiness. And it just doesn't leave. Now, this can come from a number of areas. For example, let's say we take an unborn child, and the people in their ignorance of not knowing how an abortion affects an unborn child, they carve it out so much like a piece of meat. This is what they're taught. Well, it's not a living thing yet. It's just a little fetus in the womb, and they carve it out. But the thing is, as some of you have already experienced, you have perfect knowledge of how you felt before conception and even at conception, and especially while you're in the womb. And you know that if a little child, for example, is not happy with things, and you're under anesthetic and you're having the abortion and the little baby's being cut out, then that unhappiness, I am unhappy, can be literally in the energy field of the spirit that is sucked into that hole in the aura during the anesthetic. Am I making that clear? And therefore the person from that time on is unhappy, and they do not understand why they are unhappy. And no matter what they do, they're not happy. Now this can happen during a miscarriage. It doesn't have to be an abortion, because the little spirit there is not happy that it's losing its body. It's not happy about all these things. It's not happy about all this. I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dying. And from that time on, the mother, through the miscarriage, or the mother through the abortion, she feels this tremendous, overwhelming feeling, I'm dying. And they can't get rid of it. Now, look at it this way. Many of you in this room have had abortions. I'm assured in my mind that you didn't realize what you were getting yourselves into. But now that you understand these things, you can be of so much help to other people to let them know of their alternative choices, because the choice still remains with the person no matter how you look at it. And they have to be responsible for the choices that they make. Are you hearing me? But you can counsel people and let them know the consequences of these things, because these things are getting into real hardcore type material which you have to know and you have to deal with, especially with people who have had 20 abortions and they get on the table and they're down to this unhappiness feeling, and they can't get happy no matter how hard they try. So that's entity involvement. The other one now on unhappiness would be just a calcification, which can come from any source, genetic or otherwise. And here we are being unhappy, not knowing why. But the feeling is locked into this organic computer chip full of stored memory, which is the calcification in the suture. Now this is why I believe the work of body electronics is so important, because we can affirm till doomsday and we're still unhappy. But when we get our cranial work done or get these calcifications resolved in different parts of the body, and we release these stored energies of thought, feeling, and spoken word in this terrible, overwhelming feeling of hopelessness and helplessness and I'm unhappy type of thing, when that comes out, my golly, the freedom that the person has, that the things are conspicuous for their absence, they're a transformed individual, and they say, hey, I really feel good. And I don't know why I feel so good, but that heavy weight that I've had for years is gone. And that's gone. It's conspicuous for its absence. And this is wherein we feel, all of us who are in body electronics feel this is one of the most important healing modalities on the face of the earth, because we are released from these chains of agony that we have suffered for so long. And all of us have been there. Simone, did I answer your question?
So would you say it's possible that it could work the other way round? Even if you have that organic, that locked into the computer chip in your head, if that lady worked and tried to assume it the best that she possibly could, even though on a very deep level she still felt unhappy, is that a situation where just assuming it just may not work or cannot work?
It can work if they do it right. Let's say they're meditating and using the violet flame. Now, what normally happens is people don't understand the concept of healing crisis, as already been mentioned today. And they get into a situation where all these emotions are bubbling out, and they feel this terrible, overwhelming feeling. Here I'm using the violet flame, and here I'm using meditation, and I feel so bad. Now, how can you convince that person to continue on doing what they're doing? I remember these little old ladies, they were dedicated totally to meditation and the use of the violet flame. And the moment they started using it, they're all calcified, they're all arthritic. The moment they started using it, they were in pain. And they were so angry because the pain was keeping them from focusing on their meditation. And they couldn't visualize the violet flame because the pain was so bad. And yet the very thing they were doing was dissolving the calcifications and releasing these trapped organic computer chips full of stored memory so that they could be free of it. And so the very thing that brings on the pain is the very thing which is going to be of great value to us, but we identify so much with the resistance that we'll do anything to not go through the pain. Or we'll say, I'll go through that pain tomorrow. Even though we believe the principles, we don't want that to interfere with our agenda. Okay? Doug.
In light of what John's saying here, we're looking at this concept of the beingness determines the doingness. The state of beingness determines the outer activity, the doingness. All of us are in the same boat where reactively in the past, whether it's on a soul level, a genetic level, or otherwise, we've all fallen prey to many, many, many different judgments. Where every judgment that we've entered into and are still hanging on to is a state of beingness that we're trapped in, because we've identified with one side of a duality and excluded the other. I'm not good enough, and you take your pick. There's all sorts of dualities out there. But every last one of them is a state of beingness that we've bound ourselves to through our own resistance. Because that's the essence of a judgment. We identify with one side to the exclusion of the other. As we go through life on a moment-to-moment basis, it's ultimately quite simple. We can assume a positive state of beingness by adhering to principle. In other words, we can observe a law and make a choice or a commitment to live our life according to that law or according to that principle. This is one path that we can take on a moment-to-moment basis. And it is It is a choice. And it's a choice that's made every moment, if we're honest about it. We can make that choice to uphold a law. We can make a choice to obey a certain principle. If we refuse to do that, or if we neglect the opportunity to do that, there really is only one or other alternative, and that's that we're going to be governed by the reactive content of our own mind. We're going to be governed by all of the prior choices of judgment that we've made in the past. And it really isn't any more complicated than that. We either commit to obey correct principle, or in the absence of that commitment to obey correct principle, we condemn ourselves through our own foolishness to experience the reactive content of our own mind. And it's that simple.
Okay, sir? Anita, you had something else? Doug said it, okay. Now, Bob Wilson, would you prepare yourself to be our next lecturer? We have a table over here. Let's see, is there a massage table we can put right up front here? Just all I need is one massage table, please. Somebody could just very gently bring one up here without clobbering people in the head. Well done. And Bob, I'd like you to bring our young lady up here. Lindsay, where are you? Lindsay Wheeler, and we're going to have Bob describe from a sports injury point of view here how to take care of knee injuries. So Bob, you're in charge.
Well, I've often heard the big man say, find the pain and push. That's basically what we're going to do here. Do you want to subject yourself to this again, Lindsay? Do the other leg this time. Yeah. Okay, Lindsay will assume position on the table, and we'll find the pain and push. If you're looking at any joint, whether it be a knee, ankle, elbow, or shoulder, the joint structure, you'll know your anatomy. There's a top and a bottom bit, and what we're looking for is to be able to put even pressure on both sections. So we go open the joint and go in, and move around until we find the response from the person on the table. They'll soon tell you which is the worst pain, and you apply the pressure there. It's not hard to imagine that you open the joint, and we're looking at.
You'll have to do it with Lindsay facing that way.
Bob, you'll have to turn over the other way.
Okay.
And you'll have to move back and forth whatever you.
Okay. The instruction that I had from John last night was to be able to open into the joint, find the part that's most painful, and apply severe pressure in there, and as much as can possibly be taken. Now, in Lindsay's case, she was a pretty tough little nut and didn't allow the pain to show so much, and she was going through absolute hell for about 2 hours, I'd say. And in the last half hour, I got a few tears, but I think that she was doing a very brave job to get through that time. But there was definite movement in the knee. It was an absolute fascinating experience that you actually feel the knee reconstructing under all that pressure. So I'll just demonstrate here how I was taught last night to do this. Well, we're talking about a joint injury, and there's two parts, otherwise it wouldn't be a joint. So where the two individual bones come together, make sure they're open rather than closed. So if you bend the knee slightly, you'll have a little bit of open, and you'll be able to get in more pressure. So primarily, this is where we spent most of the evening.
Yeah, I mean, it was incredibly painful pretty early, but a fair way into the session, I started to feel it was like my skin was crawling in my knee. I mean, there were things moving all over the place. And then I got sort of spasms all in my body and my legs on and off for quite some time, which was very strange as well. So, I mean, I'm not sure how much regeneration has happened in there, and I'll have to go away and sort of just see what I can do. But there's no doubt that there was a lot happening in the knee last night, so I've got no doubt that certainly something has happened. So I'm looking forward to trying it out and seeing how much has actually happened.
Some of the sensations that I felt as a point holder was as I put the pressure on and really put my weight into it, it was obviously Lindsay was in pain. The knee seemed to respond, and I within a fairly short period of time got a very cold feeling coming into my body. I was perspiring in myself, but around the actual area where my forearm was locked into the joint, it was very cold, and actually there was an endothermic reaction happening there. And without knowing exactly what time schedule it was, that I would guess about an hour later that it really started to respond, and there was like a quite wavy movement inside. And it was about that time or a little earlier that Lindsay started to actually vibrate, and the trembling was in the other leg and the hip right down, and her whole body was vibrating at a very fine frequency. And then maybe half an hour or so later, the knee that we were leaning on started to vibrate even more, and I had the illusion of the whole thing just softening up. It was like a bit of putty, and it just felt as if the whole bone structure was quite pliable. Logically, I sort of argued with that, but it's the way it felt, as if the whole thing was just plastic and moving around, like as if you were leaning on a balloon, and it had that much flexibility.
A couple of things that were fairly obvious to me straight away is that, I first injured this 17 years ago, and I probably had, although it's gradually reduced, at this stage or before yesterday, half of my kneecap was still numb. I had a very severe twisting with bone chips torn off the medial side of the femur, and I snapped my anterior cruciate, but I didn't find that out until 10 years later. But yeah, half of my kneecap has been numb really, but I would say that I'm still not 100% back. Now I have I have a lot more feeling in that part that was numb. So, and also I have in this knee, if I press my kneecap down into the joint, I can get pain, and I tried that after the point holding, and I didn't seem to be able to get any pain that way, so it seemed to be a bit different. But because I don't sort of stress the joint too much these days, I'll probably have to it'll take a while to actually just see exactly how much has changed, but I look forward to it.
There's one little test that Lindsay had me do when we finished, because she had snapped the cruciate ligament, and the examination, which you'll find most therapists will do to check the cruciate ligament, now I know that, John, I didn't know this till last night, of course, I can demonstrate that for you now and show you how that would be tested. And Lindsay passed that test quite easily. The cruciate ligament stops the bottom bit of the leg falling away from the top bit.
Yeah, and there's two ligaments that cross in the middle of the knee. One is the anterior cruciate, one is the posterior cruciate. And the anterior cruciate runs from the top of the back of the top to the front of the bottom part of the shin bone. And it stops that shin bone moving forward. So one way to test an anterior cruciate ligament is to actually pull the shin bone forward off the joint. And if you can see that the shin bone it feels loose and it comes forward, there's a problem with the anterior cruciate. And obviously if it moves back, to test the posterior cruciate, you push the shin bone back, and if you get movement there might be a problem with that ligament. But I survived. I was one of the few people who actually could survive without an anterior cruciate. That's many people who have knee reconstructions. It's usually the anterior cruciate that's damaged, but I was one of the few people that actually could survive, and I never had my knee give way and played a lot of sport on it. So I've got a fairly stable knee without it, but so I'm not sure exactly whether that has regenerated. We probably did a bit of a crude test on it last night, but I'll certainly get someone probably a bit more qualified to try it when I get back to Adelaide.
I want to thank you very much. We've, for those of you who are considering, different sports injuries, whether it's an ankle, a shoulder, elbow, or knee, you apply the pressure on them sufficiently to induce the burn. And when you get that burning in there, which Lindsay went through excruciating burning pain for about 2 hours. Is that correct, Lindsay? About 2 solid hours of nothing but solid, serious burning. And this takes a continual pressure on that. Now, I'd like to talk about why do we have to go for the burn. Simon Armstrong, where are you? Simon's on the phone. Okay. Well, this is important. Tariq, are you here? You were observing and being participant right along from the beginning here, and I'd like you to share the experience here of what happened to Simon.
I was holding yesterday Simon's tailbone, and we didn't have a very good nerve supply to the tailbone. He could feel very, very slight burning while I was burning away, and then John came over as usual just to check up on us, and then we mentioned that he didn't have a lot of burning in the tailbone. So John just said, well, we're just going to get in there, which he did. And obviously a lot of people of you heard Simon on the top of his lungs last night. And what did John do? He started down from the lumbar area. He started putting his elbow in there and slowly getting real intense burning till the point eased up, and then he would move one cervical up, and I think he went from one lumbar up, sorry. From down he went up to the T joints, I think, right? Just above the kidneys. Yep. I think was the last one was when the kidneys were really, really severe burning. That's when he really started to get burning down in the tailbone. I experienced 3 major snaps in the tailbone, and Gloria was holding points. She's in the back there. Gloria was holding points a bit up in the neck area, and Jane was holding points on the cervicals. And Gloria experienced, I think, maybe you could come and say yourself what happened. I just want to get her up here, that's all. So I can say that I heard 3 major snaps, and Gloria can tell you her story. But the main thing is after that, the tailbone really severe started burning.
And he had feeling there.
He had
The nerve
a lot
supply
of
was
pain there.
restored.
I was holding the point in the back of the heart, and he had severe burning in there too, and things were moving and shifting.
Thank you, Gloria. Tariq, what I'd like you to bring out was, you were there. How about scar tissue?
Oh yeah, before we started holding points in him, Simon mentioned, hey, have a look at the scar tissue. So we just said, okay, down with his pants, and we had a good look. And Gloria was a witness. We found 3 scar tissues, one horizontal, one bit diagonal, vertical, and then one smaller one going across. After all this pain, we put down his pants again, hey, and we only found 2 scar tissues. So we really decided to get in there and have a look closer, and there were only 2 scar tissues left. From the 2 scar tissues who were left, they were let's say the cutting tissue was smaller, thinner, let's say. So he has regenerated some stuff, has let go of some stuff, and one scar tissue has totally disappeared, and the others have gone thinner, let's say.
And how about all the numbness in the area?
He could feel basically everything after that. If you just would pinch in the area, he would have a lot of feeling, and he would be jumping already, whoa, as you heard him last night. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chris. Okay, she was anticipating. Okay. Is Brooke here by any chance? Brooke, are you on the ball this morning? Brooke, would you like to share your experience last night?
Not really.
From a instructor's point of view, would you instruct this class using yourself as a guinea pig?
Well, last night I had Jenny on my tailbone, and I had Nikki working on some cervical bones up the top of the neck there, and had Alan. Alan was on the. Yeah, I see you took a photo too. Somebody told me, Tarek. And I had Alan on the sort of lower back, middle to lower back area. And anyway, I ended up I got a lot of burning I got a lot of burning in my balls last night.
Was that the balls of your feet?
No, it was the softer version. Yeah. I told Ian a joke about that afterwards. And I just had a lot of severe burning inside, and also in the balls themselves, and on the tops of my feet around here, which is, the genital sort of area. And I was just burning and burning and burning for like, I guess a couple of hours or so, and then John came along and thought, oh, here we go, And of course, John, he wants you to verbalize it, and me, I kind of like to sit there or lie there and just think that I'm going through it.
Think that you're going through it. I love it.
I'm being careful with my words here, John. And I went through this experience when I was, a number of years ago when a guy nailed me and the balls. And I went through the whole experience and got a lot of burning out of there, and had a word pattern. First, I think the first word, I went through a couple of other word patterns like, where are you? Because the situation I was in, my friends kind of like, they took off, left me there. And
they knew that you wanted them to survive better than you.
Yeah. Maybe they had brains, maybe they had balls, I don't know. But I didn't think they had any balls, no. And I got to a word pattern of my balls are burning, and then I got to another pattern of my balls hurt, and so, I was sort of yelling that out. I don't know how many people heard that. I didn't really want to yell that out, I'm a little bit shy in that area. But, yeah, has to hide my balls, Tom, And,
according to Maori custom, we'll have to give you a good massage in that area.
Yeah. If you know anything about full Maori body massage, they massage both externally and internally whether you're a male or female. They do a full body massage. But I know I've been for a few hours, and I checked my eyes this morning, and I think my scurf rim's lightened a little more, and also I got a couple of spots in those areas. Last week I went through a different session when I was really young, and I was playing marbles with with this guy, and when I was really young I was really good at marbles. Anyone play marbles here? Did anybody? You know what I'm talking about? And this guy just had this bonza, which was just like the only one in the whole school, and I wanted that thing. So I played him one day, and I won this whole bag off him, everything he ever had, The last one he played with was the one I wanted. And I won that off him, and then, he got pretty upset and had a good hefty pair of shoes on, and he kicked me in the balls as well. I was only little then, so last week I kind of went through that when I had Summer on my pubic point and Rex on my anterior cervicals, and that was pretty intense. And Summer was on this side, and then last night when Jenny was on my tailbone, I got a lot of more burning on the other side, which is where on the second incident where this guy, nailed me with his boots.
The question is did you get the memories of prior events in other lifetimes?
No. Not really other lifetimes. Not that I can recall. I just the experiences themselves, the memories themselves in this lifetime.
May I just acquaint you with the thought?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're just exploring some thinking there, and I just want you just to explore this. But I remember one fellow at the VNC. Remember Brian? Your neighbor across the street. Brian.
Oh, the guy who couldn't sit on a cushion.
David.
Oh, David Bryan. Oh,
okay.
Last name there. Okay, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Remember him? Well, he went through this for about 6 solid hours, and after a while, the room phased out. Now you have to understand this. Where we were phased out entirely, and he was no longer there. He was strung up, one arm up this way, one arm up this way, one leg out one way, one leg in the other way. And because he had done some little infraction which offended the chief or somebody, they took one of these coconut fronds. You know how the coconut fronds are dry, and you just bend them over and you make a great big a torch out of them. And they lit that doggone thing and took it right up there, right between his legs, and burned off his balls. And he was there just burning and burning, and you could smell the flesh. You could smell that flesh cooking away. It's better than Rocky Mountain oysters. And it was just burning away. Remember that? And the smell was just terrible. Just burning flesh, burning hair, and the whole works. And he just was there burning and burning and burning for hours. Now, he was a very sterile young man. And after that, all he had to do was look at a woman, and she got pregnant. It was just amazing because he became extremely fertile. Present company accepted. Okay? But I want you to understand that there's oftentimes carryovers in this lifetime in patterns from prior lifetimes, and we need to examine our roots, so to speak.
I know, by the sounds of that, I think I'm pretty happy just dealing the ones in this lifetime. And when I was saying before, I checked my eyes, and there's one little spot I had in And this side, it's like diminished, right down. It's just a little speck now. And then the other side, it's it's not as dark as it was before. It's quite, it's lightened up quite a lot. So I'm pleased about that. I'm sure my balls are too.
I wonder what happened to all of his relatives during this time, what the resonant frequency would have been.
Maybe I should make some phone calls and find out.
Anything more you want to add, Brooke? We want to get a certificate for Brooke because he's now come up to a legitimate level 7.
Yeah. I think that's all. I didn't really want to cover it at all, so I think I've said enough.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much.
Chris is back.
Has Chris returned? You have to catch her quick because she's just like one of these little fish, that darts from one place to another at high speed. Chris, would you come up here, please? You're now our instructor. And Tariq, I'm going to have you come up again.
Nice try there.
No, yeah, Simon has a good back. We'll leave him alone for now. Chris, can you get up here a little bit more here so they can get you on the camera? Good. Now, it's been just a little over a week ago when I tested Chris on muscle structures pertaining to the biceps in her arm. And there was absolutely no strength there. And there was very little strength at that time, from my perception, in her hands. Now, when the body heals from the inside out. And so you deal, first of all, with the stomach, so to speak, central nervous system, stomach area, stomach lining. And all of this has to do with the biceps, because the biceps is the muscle which reflects directly to the stomach lining, the stomach musculature, and so on, which is the very innermost part of the iris of the eye. And so I asked Chris to do a certain little muscle, shall we say, exercise that Chris was unable to do at that time. And Tariq, would you come up here, please? And I'd like you to use a minimal amount of resistance here on Chris. And I'm going to show you what has happened here, because this cannot happen with muscular dystrophy. Because once your muscles have been destroyed through atrophy and so on, and nerve supply, you cannot regenerate muscular dystrophy. It does not happen, according to all of my studies. Now, I want you to see what's going on with Chris, because Chris has been getting nerve supply in through her body, circulation back to her body, and this has been a condition of, shall I use the word, of atrophy over about 20-year period. And Tariq, would you just take her by the left hand now? That's just fine. Now take her by the hand, and just to hold her there, and with minimal resistance, Chris, I want you to now flex this atrophied bicep muscle. No? Well, look what she just did. You see that? She couldn't do that a week ago. She couldn't do it yesterday? Okay, now put just a minimal amount of resistance there, Tariq, in the hand. Put your hand right there, and just don't pull it up for her, but just a minimal amount of resistance so you can feel that she is pulling up your hand. Now let it go, let it flow with her. Don't be too hard on her.
Okay. He's pushing wicked hard.
Oh yeah, he's holding her down, like a pump handle, just holds it right there. Okay, pull it on up, Chris.
He's in a bad way. He doesn't know how to do this.
Do it gently. Do it gently. Don't put much pressure down there. And let her pull the arm up now, but you can feel that she's doing it. Pull it up now, Chris. You got it.
It's in the wrong side.
Hold it. Can I pull her right on up? There it goes. Now that's biceps. And do it the other arm now. But just a gentle resistance. Here it comes. Now, Tariq, did you feel that? Yes. Okay, have you had that experience before? You won't let him play with you?
No, I've tried many times, but she doesn't let me. But Sunday, when the gemstone man was here, we needed to test some gems on Chris. And she just held the two fingers together, and I started pulling, and I noticed now that she has already much and much more strength to keep those two fingers together. So I was totally excited when I heard this morning, actually, as I didn't see Chris last night. And it's great. Would you like to say something?
Thank you.
Okay, but bottom line, this is a genetic thing. Hang tight. This is a genetic thing here now with Chris. It's in the family. And what's happening now is we have nerve supply restored, which she has felt because of the heat and the circulation restored to the muscles of the body, throughout the whole body. There's been a few times her whole body has just been heated up. And the circulation is coming back now. That's marvelous. Now, I just want you to be aware of this, because this is the first time that, for Chris, that there's outer physical evidence that the body is regenerating. Now, this is important. Now, Karen, would you come up here, please? I want you to grab her hand and have Chris give you a squeeze in that hand. Does she tell us what you feel?
I would grade this muscle to be pretty good.
Okay, try the other hand now with the
equally. I would say that was equal strength, and I would rate that as good or good plus.
Say that again.
I would rate her muscle strength as good or good plus in both hands.
Okay. You got that now? Yes. Okay, but the thing was, last week she didn't have a whole lot of strength in her hands. But this week when she gripped me, it was solid. And she's been working with exercising to just build up the muscles that had atrophied over a number of years. Now we're on our way back, and this is where we don't let up. Okay? Yes. Very simply, just taking the hand and moving it like this and really forcing it to move. Now the hands are like the feet. It has all of the pressure points in the whole body in the hands, and I've had her do some exercising also with the feet to roll the feet around and move them back and forth so that we can get unblocked the area in the ankles where there's very little flexibility at this point of time. We can't let that calcify up. So we want to get that in motion and get that moving very well. And the other one was simply doing this, which exercises the bicep, which will then create a healing in the area, in the very central part of the iris. Okay? Now, when that inner part of the body heals and get the digestion going, then the rest of the body will start to heal also. Kyle. I don't understand. What was that call down there about? Vita, is he all right? Let me look. Vita's fine. He's just going through some stuff. He's been on the program a bit, hasn't he?
It just seemed the right time to mention this. There was an exercise I was taught, it's just called shaking. And there have been a few people now who haven't had limb movement or limb strength or limb control who have gotten it back using this. It's just a very simple exercise. And what I've noticed is if you administer a pinch test to people where the numbness is not incredibly deeply embedded, shall we say, where they don't jump no matter how hard you pinch their feet, and you might spend 10 minutes doing this exercise with people, and what I've observed is they jump. And they get a tingling, warm sensation that gradually starts to come through those particular tissues. And this is taught to me by a man called Nicholas Van Voorst, who started a system of natural healing, which is called Blue Gold Health Teaching Services now. But you might take a person, and this is case history now. I'm talking about a young boy in Brisbane. And all you might... no, I'm not talking about him because originally he could only move his tongue. I'm talking about someone else. I can see his mother. Anyway, like just all they can move is the finger. And so what they do is they do deep breathing. They have all their nutrients in there. They do deep breathing, and all they do is they breathe deeply. They relax their tongue and their jaw, and they wiggle while they're breathing deeply, and they wiggle whatever they can wiggle. And after a while, this seems to set up a current in the collagen fibrils because collagen is piezoelectric. And we start to get, and then they might do that for a minute and then rest for a minute. And what happens is then, while they're doing their deep breathing, they start to get feeling in areas where they didn't have it before, very gradually. This is very gradual. It takes, several months. And they start to get movement back maybe in the next finger. And they wiggle 2 fingers or 3 fingers. And gradually this spreads over the hand, and then it gradually will spread up to the wrist, and very gradually, maybe after a year, then it's right up into the shoulder. Now this is case history, and I think it's important just to share this because this is an exercise that people who have movement problems and numb areas can do. And I'll be showing that in the breathing thing on Sunday night, I think it is, or afternoon. And there are whole body forms of it where the peripheral nerves to the whole body get oxygen again and they wake up and they tingle and vibrate. It's a very simple exercise. Often people get burning in their body while they're doing it. Depends on several factors, including their hormones. But just about everyone gets tingling. And this is a very valuable exercise where people are getting movement back in areas where they haven't had it before. Now, if the people can't move it themselves, and this one fellow in Brisbane who's now moving his arms, that was a year ago. I don't know what he's doing now, but he was moving his arms where he could never move his arms before. He was, I think, just beginning to get fine motor control in his hands again. And originally, he couldn't turn his head. All he could do was move his tongue and his jaw a little bit. And what people would do is they'd come along, grab onto an arm, maybe like this, and they'd just shake it and encourage him to relax his tongue and jaw and breathe. So his airway was open. Your ears are burning. And they just shake it for a minute and then rest and shake it and rest, and that was all it was. Incredibly simple thing. But over a period of months, tremendous result.
Thank you, Kyle. Where's David Whistler? David had requested expressing some observations that he'd like to make. Everything all right, sir? Yeah, Goodwin, no problem. David, you're on, sir.
Good morning, lovers. And good morning to
you notice that beautiful smile he has? He's back with us again.
And good morning to the collective unconscious. And everyone in between. There's two things I want to talk about this morning. One is the importance of staying on the point, absolutely present with the person on the table when you're holding point. The second thing is John, do you mind if I discuss something of what happened with you last night? The second point is not to laugh at somebody when they're in difficulties. And if you feel some resistance to me, just remember you're either in a loving space or you're in the service of the ego.
We're laughing with you.
And nothing in between.
One point I would make with respect to John last evening is there's a big difference between people laughing at somebody and laughing with somebody. And I think in John's case last night, I think the laughter was very, very helpful as I observed it. And I did not interpret that as anybody laughing at John. I think we're all just having fun with him. Is that how it felt to you, John? Yeah.
That wasn't the way I experienced it. I didn't experience people loving John when they were laughing at him last night. And that didn't feel good. And when somebody's in difficulty, as John was, what was it? I want to lie down. I want to lie down.
We all want to lie down.
Look at me, you think I'm standing up. I felt very concerned for John because I felt that you were really lost in your stuff last night. I want to lie down. That went on for about 15 minutes. Or more, I don't know. It just went on.
I just love David's observation of people getting lost in their stuff.
Well, there's an obvious difference to me last night between someone who was able to focus on the point holder and someone who was lost in their stuff. Okay, so the laughter issue aside, the real issue is when you're there to hold points, you need to be able to stay conscious and to focus on the needs of the person on the table. What was that, Gary? Yeah. And in John's case last night, what I felt he needed was for someone to come along and say, John, you want to lie down? Yep. So you really feel that? Yep. Okay, so now let go of it and come back to what you're here for, which is to be here 100% for the person on the table. Now, any less than that, for me, is not enough. Like tomorrow we're going to do cranials. There's no room for stuffing around. There's no room for drifting off. We're into some really painful stuff there. We need to be present for the person we're serving. I think I've made that clear enough. John?
Do we all agree with what David has said, that we should be there to the best of our ability with the person we're holding points on? Point well taken.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd agree with that. In answer to that comment, David, well, two things. I mean, firstly, I stayed on the point all the time, and even though I was going through my stuff, I was actually checking to make sure I was on the point. And secondly, I wouldn't have allowed myself to go through anything had the person on the table at the time had been going through any of their own stuff, and or was likely to. And in fact, I don't know. I mean, I didn't actually know what table you were on last night, but I think it was on the other side of the room. But it was actually Philip who encouraged me to go into my stuff in the first place. He was actually facilitating me. He had no pain at the time, I don't think, or very little. And even this morning he stated he wasn't, at the time he wasn't likely to go into anything. And in that case I let it rip.
I've had an experience in a similar vein. Tana was holding my pancreas point, and I was frying her real good, and I was in consciousness, and she was really suffering. And she went into her stuff, and the result that appeared to happen to me was that when she allowed herself to go through it, that kicked me out of unconsciousness, and then I got a lot of good burning up my leg.
I think there's been several people in here at several tables I've gone to where a person is in a word pattern, and then the person holding the point, they get triggered by that word pattern, and they also go into their stuff. And I don't want to get to the point where it's so rigid, the point holding, that you can't allow a point holder to do that. I mean, I remember when Heather was going through something about her mom. It was very emotional, and then Lil went into something deep about hers. And I mean, I thought it was beautiful. They were both working through it. I don't think Heather was being having less attention to her by Lil going through her stuff. So I think you have to look at the, I don't think there's a rule here. Unless the person on the table goes hysterical, and I've seen this happen in the Cook Islands. We had one lady where a person was holding her points and they started to go into their stuff, and she got so hysterical, she goes, "This is my point holding, and I don't want anybody to go in their stuff. It's only my stuff."
That was John Hutchinson.
No, John Hutchinson was holding the point. And this woman got very hysterical, and she said, "This is my stuff, and I don't want anybody of my point holders going into their stuff." Well, I think in life we have to encompass everything around us. We're not living in a little capsule, a little bubble when we go out there, and there's influences all around you, and you're not going to be in a little bubble. And if a point holder goes into their stuff, I think we have to somehow encompass that, or maybe even work with it in our own word pattern.
I think when we're holding a point, and the thumb gets numb, and then the arm gets numb, and then the shoulder gets numb, and then the head gets numb, and you go unconscious, and you just sit there. You don't know where your points are. You don't know where your hand is, and reality fades out, and you're sitting there in blackness of your mind. You're still holding a point. I'm so grateful that somebody's still there trying to hold a point, working through their stuff. that whatever they do is perfectly fine with me, that eventually we'll get through it and get back on to business again. Okay? This is the way I see it.
I'll go.
Glad you switched it off. Yeah, we're here as instructors. And if you get a group, well, any size group, as an instructor, if you go off into your own stuff, you're putting everyone under pressure in your group. And I'd like you to think about that. We're here as instructors, and I hope eventually that all of us will be having some sort of groups. And as an instructor and everyone are relying on you in the group, if you go into your own stuff, if you allow yourself to go into your own stuff while you're helping the group, you're going to lose support in the group quickly.
Well, what I would say to that is that if you're going to have a point-holding group, I don't think you should be holding points. I think you should be supervising the tables and going from, and staying, not going into your stuff at the moment. Just be there for the tables.
You're kidding. What happens when you go from one table to the other? You're going from one vortex of extreme energy to the next, and you get your hormones rattled every time you move from table to table, and you walk from one end of the room to the other, and by the time you get to the other end of the room, you're in a healing crisis. And so the instructor, I think, gets the most out of it. And at the end of the day, they wonder how they survived. And this is something here I want you to consider also, because even though you're an instructor, that does not, shall we say, exempt you from going through a massive healing crisis where you can't even move out of a bed. I've been there.
That's okay. You wouldn't go to you'd excuse yourself from that meeting, but as an instructor, you certainly couldn't keep going to your own stuff. Not from where I'm coming from. And as regards of holding points, there are times as an instructor you will feel that you need to hold certain points, and you'll hold those points. That's what you're there for.
I can remember back around, I think it was about 1987 or so, I can remember John in a Visualization and Consciousness course. It was actually the biggest VNC. I think there was about 35 people in it. And I can remember John sitting up there in front of the class trying to teach with a great big bowl in front of him, and every time he'd start to try to speak, he'd throw up.
On one particular subject.
So I don't know, Peter. I feel like instructors are human beings, no more so or no less so than anyone else, and I think it's I think the thing to realize is everyone has their stuff to go through, and why should we be so limited and rigid about it? Obviously, as some of you know, to some extent or another, I've been going through a tremendous amount of stuff the last 2 or 3 weeks, and no great mysteries there. But on the one hand, that probably has interfered with my concentration, no doubt. And yet, on the other hand, I've had what concentration? Yeah, good point. Yet, on the other hand, I've had a lot of people come up to me outside of class who don't even really perhaps know exactly what the situation is, who've just expressed to me in their own way that it's been very, very good for them just to get to see that we're all human beings too, and we have our own stuff to go through and all that. So I'm hanging in there. I'm hanging in there the best I can, and I make no apologies for that. And I think you should do yourself the same favor, Peter, and just be a human being. You don't have to be Superman anymore.
I fully agree with all that, but I think John and you, Doug, you certainly wouldn't go into any of that while he was doing a cranial. Certainly not on the triples. Has that happened? Well, it could happen to me then. But there would have been at times when you felt it could happen, and you've gone through that.
We're going to be going a couple of more hours here before we take a break. So you're just going to have to get your stomachs under control here for a while. Now, no problem. But the thing is in cranial work, whether you're an instructor or whether you're just simply administering the cranial point, I've had people get into electricity on cranial points, which has literally fried them and put them into healing crisis where they were no longer in the room holding a point on a cranial. They were some other time, some other place, off in La La Land somewhere, and they still continued holding the point. They eventually came back out of it. They finished the cranial. Everything turned out just fine. You cannot predict how or when you're going to have a healing crisis. I just want to make that well assured. And when it happens, we all support one another in it. Because wherever we're working together collectively, we're all in the same boat together. And we help each other through these things without what I will call a rigidity. And just say, that's the way it is. Let's do the best we can under the circumstances. And that even though the point is well taken, we do the best we can to be there for the person we're working with. Sometimes our best is not even sufficient, but we have charity toward that situation until it does come right.
As far as I've understood point holding as well, it's possible even for the point holder to go through stuff that is happening for the one who's having his point or her points held, which would then, if you don't release that, deprive them of the privilege of going through that and become conscious of it. And I want to make sure, David, that you're laughing with us because we're laughing with you.
What does the group think about where someone comes up on a point holder and starts massaging their shoulders and causes a movement on the point? That is happening here.
And that has happened.
Yes.
If there is extraneous activity going along, you'll have somebody like Ingrid, for example, will be holding a point. She does a beautiful job. And then she'll just feel to go over here and touch a person in a certain way in a certain place. Okay? I'll look at it. And do I make an issue out of it? No, I don't. If somebody goes up here and starts massaging a shoulder thinking the person needs a little relaxation, do I make an issue out of it? No. But what do I do tell the people? Hold the point and concentrate on what David has said. If you're going to hold a point, then do the best you can at holding that point, and don't mix it with a lot of other little things going on. I think we should consider that. Now that's rigidity perhaps, but there has to be some ground rules within which we operate. And that if you can tolerate my bad jokes when I go from table to table, I guess I can tolerate your farts. It goes both ways. All right? Occupational hazards all the way around, folks.
So what we're saying, anything that happens then is okay. That's virtually what we're saying.
And what I'd like to say is, hang on, Peter, we're last year's model. We're going to learn to be more flexible and update. Is that it?
Yay!
I recently at home had a...
There's a line.
I'm here now. Tough. I thought you were just standing there sort of displaying yourself.
They sure are.
I was recently having a point holding session at home, and I had a friend who was holding points for the first time, and I had sort of instructed him as to what to do, and there were only 3 of us there, and there were 2 people on my feet, and one had finished but was just sort of sitting with us, and the person on my feet suddenly said he felt sick and then started to sweat and said he thought he was going to pass out, which he did, fell on the floor, and but still had his hand on my foot. And I'd never seen this before. I'd never seen a point holder go through a healing crisis. So, I mean, it was a bit of a shock to me that he was actually unconscious and just looked terrible, and went sort of green and white and just looked like he was about to die. And Anthony, the other person, actually came over and propped him up and held him up. And I ended up sitting up and holding his hand on my point. I thought, I can't leave him in the middle of this. And then eventually he started to go through a lot of stuff, and I facilitated. And then Anthony thought that it might be better if he left. So I just ended up sitting up through my point holding session and facilitating this other person through his stuff. And I mean, I didn't resent that at all. I thought it was great that he actually had a healing, and it was wonderful for him. I mean, he was very wiped out afterwards, and really wasn't expecting it, and I wasn't expecting it. But yeah, it was a great learning.
Thank you, Lil. I think this is really important, because what's really the objective of the point holding session? What's really the objective of the point holding session? To get to a greater state of loving. And by being so grateful that this person went through their stuff, I mean, that's wonderful. In my eyes, I think that's absolutely wonderful.
So do I need. Isn't controversy a wonderful thing? That we have fun with it? When someone's entering into the point holding, isn't it really up to divine perfection what happens, and we should roll with that?
Do we see controversy here, or do we see unity? I see nothing but beautiful unity.
Okay, this will be serious for a change. As soon as you notice how I dressed, tucked my shirt in, and everything else for the camera. Yep. But the rest of this is serious. My first point holding sessions when people held on me, and Doug was there. Chris knows about it. As soon as she plugged into my heart points, got sick for about 2 hours. Julie was crying constantly like that. This goes all the way from Lewis's house, where every time somebody plugged in me, Jane and Jane got emotional. Thank you, I took it very nicely. Up in Portland, we had a couple guys up there and women up there that got, ill and a ton of burning, and I have kind of a reputation for really frying people. John and Anita got sick yesterday, and they deserved it. They called for a bucket and everything for plugging on me and causing me an awful lot of pain, which I did not need at that time. Very much so.
Do you hear that explorative there? Oh, how wonderful.
I'm lovingly and willingly, I'm going through it. Rossi, I don't know who's had him hold points, but when they did heart points on me and John said I was turning all frosty, well, Rossi decides to get sick, and he went through something just major. This guy was in agony, and he didn't know what to call for, a bucket or something a little bit lower to sit on. And I have no problem with that. I feel sorry for people that hold points on me, because a lot of times they go through a lot of stuff. And so as long as you stay on the points and don't go rocking and rolling all over the place, I have no problem with that, because I think you guys do a pretty rough job, especially on people that have a reputation for burning and everything. John Hutchinson, I watched him, my roomie, right over there. Can the camera get him? But John has gone through a lot of stuff, and he's told me about his things of holding points on people and going into it. And he's starting to really come out of it. We have long talks in the room at night. He throws stuff at me now. He's become very assertive and very aggressive. I've been hit with toilet paper rolls. The little balls he tries to juggle, and if I watch him, he does it like 6 or 7 times before he drops them and throws those. But he's learning how to stand up for himself now, and I think he's doing a good job. So I want you to know, I was laughing at you. Well, I mean, seriously, you were hysterical. And so it relieves a lot of tension. That's about it. I try to use humor. Let me see. I know somebody was around here that was frying yesterday and asking for some humor or something like that, and I try to throw that in. I don't get distracted, and if somebody wants to come up, I've had a lot of people come by me, and before the Reiki even put their hands above me or something, and then even after they learn Reiki, you start doing Reiki on me afterwards. I don't mind if you guys touch me or something like that. I guess that's what I'm here for. So,
the new rage here with Tom, the new rage is my points are hotter than your points.
Oh my. But I don't think there's any controversy here, at least not with me. If you guys go into something, I've had people on me for a real long time, 6.5 hours and stuff. I don't like staying there that long. I'd like to burn out in an hour and be done. So if you guys go into any type of healing crisis or something, as long as you don't throw up on me or something like that, and I'm serious on this is not teasing, as long as you don't throw up on me or something, no, if you got things to work through and this is helping you, because what Doug has told me from the first 2 that I went to with Lewis and up in Portland, Doug said that's a lot of healing takes place through point holding, and that's why I never mind holding points on somebody, is because I feel that besides giving something, you're probably getting it back, which is what you've talked about before. So no, I have no problem with it, and I just want to thank everybody who's done a hell of a job. And Ross, you really did. And where's Rexy? Sexy Rexy and Sama. Here's 2 people on my pubic bones who, which, like I said, made some jokes about it. These guys stayed right there. That was some painful stuff, and they stayed there all the way on it. And I have had some really, really good point holders. Where's Dana? Is Dana around here someplace? Oh, there she is. Dana had an elbow up my gluteus maximus for about 5 hours, and you cannot have somebody tied into you that well where she was noticing everything I was going through. She could call it a stinger, boom, same time, heat, electricity, and she burned for 5 hours on me, then went back on the table and didn't get off till past 1 o'clock. So when you're holding somebody that long and frying and going through crisis, then you have to go back on the table and go through it again. This has taken a lot out of people. I really appreciate it. I've had some real good point holders. And Sakara, yeah, you hurt me too. But not very much.
Yes, I used to pride myself on point holding, but last night I didn't get anywhere with Kai. It seemed as if every point I held nothing came out of it virtually. But yeah, I think overall the trick to look at point holding like this is to see that the point holder and the point holdee are one. That the old story with the healing, the healer and the healer are one, and the idea of the teacher and the taught are one. I think if we get too far away from that, and then we lose the plot a bit. And yeah, I try to remember that. I many times fail, but I try to keep it in mind.
I'd just like to tell you about my experience last night and how when I heard John, I was lying out the back there and I heard John calling out, I can't stand, no, I want to lie down. And that was wonderful for me because it took me to enthusiasm. What I'd been through previously was holding the tailbone for Heather and going to my own healing crisis of experiencing malaria and having no strength in my body. And I had to stand up for 5 hours, and I don't know if any of you have had malaria, but you can't stand up, and it was exactly as if I had malaria. That it felt exactly the same. And after about 2 hours, I was praying to God to hold me up. My hand was completely numb. I couldn't feel anything. I was praying to God to find the point, hold the point, help me stand up. And then I realised with my own God presence, I will stand up. And I thought of Doug and his mushroom incident, and I thought I'll stand up straight. I can stand up. And I continued, and I got a bit of strength then to press harder. That went on for an hour or so, and then finally someone actually came along. That was Gavin, and held me up for 2 hours. By this stage, it was quite difficult. He held me up for 2 hours. eventually I collapsed and I was lying out the back in a healing crisis, and when I heard John calling out, "I want to lie down," it was really wonderful, and thank you.
Yeah, a couple of things I want to mention. As instructors, if we go out there and become healers, I'm the healer and you are the patient, then we don't have any right to have any healing crises when we are supervising or holding points. But if we let people know that the healing is within them, and a good solid talk before to know that we are all in one and we're just helping each other, then I think the people and the group will accept that we're going through a healing crisis. I had an experience once in Tanzania when I was supervising or facilitating, going from table to table, and all of a sudden I had a lot of heat on my bombs, really burning, and I kind of dismissed it, and I kept going. Then I think it was Amiki who was holding a Radcast point or so, and I said, "I'm having burning." I wasn't concentrating on myself, I was concentrating on the stuff that was going on. But an interesting thing happened. Just at that moment, the thought pattern came in, very clear. And on the table, I've not had that kind of a situation happens and you have a thought pattern. And it was beautiful to share it with the rest of the group. So I think if we let everybody know that we're just human beings still going through our stuff, we can handle it. That's all.
I just wanted to share my experience when I was holding Ken Walter's heel, and I didn't realise till afterwards, but it was a crucial point on my body too, and Lewis was with me, and who else was there? Oh yes, John. And John was doing the tailbone, and there was a lot of pain for Ken, and I had a very, very sore thumb, and then I had this really strong searing pain, which everybody knows very well, and I was thinking, I don't know what to do with this. And then it was, yes, of course I do know what to do with this, and Lewis was encouraging me, doing a little bit of quiet facilitating. But what I really wanted to say was I had really the most beautiful experience that I've had yet, holding this point, and I was lucky to be sitting fairly straight, and had the most amazing vibration going up and down my body. I had about 4 or 5 memories. I was very conscious of holding on to the point, but I was extremely grateful for the experience of feeling the pain, the memory, feeling the love, feeling the pain go out of my finger, and then having some brief respite before the next one came. So and it's the first time I've had that experience, and it's the most profound experience that I've had so far, holding a point rather than experiencing the point holding. Yesterday I had the similar experience of having lots and lots of searing, burning pain, but not the same experience of being able to use it. So it's all a really, really good learning for me, and I'm very grateful for whatever happens, and I realise that we can't have any expectation of how it's going to be. Just whatever happens, happens. Thank you.
I want to thank all those people who have contributed. There are so many things we could share that each person has gone through on their individual stuff, which would be just fill volumes and volumes of information that would be valid for everybody. John?
I have 2 things I'd like to say. Firstly, a couple of weeks ago I had a point holding on a Saturday night in which I was on the table. And also on the same night in here, it was Maggie who was on the table as well. And I know the way that she went through all her thought patterns actually inspired me to go through mine. And I like adopted her style, and it's it's as a result of that I'm not been going as hard as I can each time I've been coming up with stuff during the point holdings as well as on the table. And I just sort of like to say that if an instructor actually does go through their stuff, it's a good example in the point holding group. Not all the time, obviously, but just, when it happens, and it can be a very good thing. Also, I have a question about the cranials that are about to happen. I'm just sort of wondering if that is a reason that you don't normally give a cranial unless you've gone through one. Are you more likely to come up going into your own stuff if you haven't had a cranial before, or what's the reason?
What we always try to do is to get experienced cranial givers to give a person their first cranial, because oftentimes the pain that's locked into a cranial is just as hard on the point holder as it is on the person receiving a cranial. And I've given cranials before where it took me maybe 3 days to recover from it. That's in the past. But today the cranials are far more intense than they were in days before. But on the other hand, people are now able to handle the cranials much easier than we did in years past. There's an intensification and a buildup of stamina and strength in the people that I haven't seen before, Doug. I don't know if you have, but it's phenomenal. Because a lot of the things that we've been doing here would put most people under the table and into healing crisis for weeks. That's not happening. People are bouncing right back really quickly and getting on with what has to be done. Now,
even last year, if you compare the amount of complaining about lectures going too long and people not being able to sit still and all that, we haven't really had that this year, even just 12 months ago.
Are you aware of every little thing that everyone has been sharing is a very vital, important factor of understanding that needs to be dealt with by the instructor? We're not just into a mechanical thing. We're into a powerful modality where we need to handle the problems that arise after the point holding has taken place, sometimes for weeks after. And like some people I remember have put in on their agenda, my hours are from 9 to 5, and if you have a healing crisis, don't bother me at 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, when you have a healing crisis, we need to have a support team, don't we? And we need to be there to help the people. And that's what it is. So we don't complain if we get called out at 3 o'clock in the morning. We may not get our sleep, but that's part of the job opportunity. It's part of the hazards of the course, so to speak. And each of you will have that in many, many odd ways. Now, the best page to turn to is about page 22 in your little handouts. And we're going to start working on the area of what we call the triple axis. Now, is that clear? Yeah. Is that better? Okay. first muscle we're going to deal with again, which we've just dealt with, we talked about the superior and inferior temporal line across here. Now, this particular muscle, right in through here, is called the temporalis muscle. Now, that temporalis muscle goes down through this area and under what we call the zygomatic arch right through here, which has been removed on this particular picture. Now, what that actually looks like as you're looking at this, you've got your superior temporal line right across here on the skull, and you've got that on your checklist that you need to check off so that you know where that is. The muscle is what we call the origin of the temporalis muscle. It's where it is fixated to begin with, and it comes down through here. This is your temporalis muscle, covering the entire temporal bone, and then coming down under what we call this zygomatic arch. And when they say zygomatic arch of the temporal bone, that means this particular thing originates from the temporal bone and it points to the zygomatic bone. So it's a zygomatic arch of the temporal bone, and you have a suture right in this area here, which is very, very painful. Where if you've ever been knocked in the cheekbone or smashed in a car wreck or something like this, this suture is usually quite far off and needs to have some work done on it with point holding. You got that? That's an important point. Okay, so this suture, the zygomatic temporal suture right here is very important. Now, this particular muscle comes all the way under the zygomatic bone and attaches itself to this particular portion of the mandible, and this is called the coronoid process of the mandible. Now, that's going to look like this. And we're dealing with what we call the medial half of the temporal. In other words, this is facing inward. That, I don't know what page that is, but it's in your 31, okay? Now notice this area here on the inside, or what we call the medial portion of the coronoid process of the mandible. This is where the temporalis muscle is going to be indicated. 34? 34. Okay. Now, what we've got then on this particular temporalis muscle is you're going to have your finger positioned in what we call the triple axis, so that the very outer portion of your finger, of your index finger, the outer portion will be laid right against this particular structure. So, what we're dealing with is you've got a finger, which will be your first finger, right here, going back through this area, right in here, and you're going to have the coronoid process of your mandible, which is your lower jawbone, right in here, and so the outer portion of this finger will be against the temporalis, what we call insertion, where the insertion will always take place on the movable portion. Your fixed portion of the muscle will be where the origin is. The insertion is where it's going to be attached to a movable portion of the bone. So, you're going to put your finger back in through here, and you're going to have your finger right next to that temporalis muscle. Now, in your notes, the temporalis muscle will have a direct reflex to the thyroid gland. Okay. The next muscle that we're going to be looking at we're going to show everyone, and Anita is going to point this out to you. And so as Anita's pointing this out to you, the finger will be back so that the very front of the finger, the top of the finger otherwise, will be attached directly to the temporalis muscle, which will be where the insertion will be on the medial portion of that coronoid process. So right again, Donna, you're going right back in here. Okay? And you're going to have the finger then will be up against this portion of the mandible. It'll be pressing against this. Now, Anita's going to go around to each of you and show that to you. Now, that's it. Now, that's exactly it. Now, what I had mentioned is that the origin of the muscle will always be the immovable part of the bone. In other words, relatively speaking, because you have exceptions to that concept. But that's the origin. The insertion will be where you have the movable part of the bone, which in this case will be on the coronoid process of the mandible. And the temporalis will be under, shall we say, the medial portion of that coronoid process. Okay, we got that. The next part, thank you for slowing me down, Donna. Now this next part is going to be even more difficult to understand. Okay? Right here is the pterygoideus muscle. And right here is the medialis. There's the lateralis and then there's the medialis. Now, this is the lateralis here. This is lateral. This is the pterygoideus medialis here. These two particular muscles are going to be attached to what we call the pterygoid plate of the sphenoid bone. And I'm going to try to find that for you here. Here it is. It's called the lateral pterygoid plate of the sphenoid bone. Now you'll have this on your checklist and you're going to have to learn to find it on the skull. Now this particular bone structure here will be a portion of the sphenoid bone, which Doug had mentioned yesterday is like a great big bird flying through the middle of the skull. It just goes from one end to the other. It goes from the temple bones here, and then it goes down inside of the mouth on this big bone here, and then it goes back in the orbit of the eye, way back behind the eyeball, and then it goes back all the way through the center of the head structure. Now, right in here, this will be the lateral pterygoid plate of the sphenoid bone. You will have, in this particular area, you'll have the insertion of the pterygoideus medialis and the pterygoideus lateralis, which are two of the major muscle structures we will be dealing with in the triple axis. These muscles are extremely painful when you touch them. They store up tremendous amounts of pain, and the muscles are usually balled up in a spasm, wherein the spasm moves from here and here in this manner, here and here. Now they're connected here to the lateral pterygoid plate of the sphenoid, and they are tied in here to what we call the mastoid process, which is wrapped around the right in this area where the upper part of the ramus goes right into that little socket right here. Right around here you have a very interesting little tendon that goes around through there, ligaments I might add, and from way inside of here, way in here, you have the muscles coming up into, from here and from here, into this TMJ, which we call the temporal mandibular joint. And so a lot of people who have a cracking jaw or a popping jaw, or where the TMJ is quite painful, it is due to the fact that there is a spasm in these particular muscle structures here and here, which are pulling on the upper part of the ramus called the condyle. Okay? Now, right in here, you're going to have a whole lot of ligament, and this is going to be tied into that. And so when this muscle gets in a spasm, this does not move here necessarily, but what happens is it pulls out the lateral pterygoid plate of the sphenoid bone. And if you just think of a little lever action inside the head of this big bird with big wings spanning, we're not going to explain this. It'll pull in the temple, which is part of the sphenoid bone right here. And you will remember. Pardon me?